Good evening. The headlines tonight, the 8th of June 1944. Strong German counterattacks are blocking the British and Canadian armies outside Caen. German panzer divisions have been brought up to reinforce the town. Supreme headquarters say the crucial stage of the battle is approaching. Mr. Churchill has warned against over-optimism. He says enormous exertions lie ahead. After their early setbacks, American troops are advancing. There's fierce fighting around the town of Isigny. There's been a row about class in the Lords after a Tory said public schools produced better, braver soldiers. And Private Pigeon is playing his part in the Allied advance. D-Day +2 and the British-Canadian advance seems to have stalled. The Allies haven't been pushed back, but strong German counterattacks are preventing our forces from moving forward. The battle, according to Supreme Allied headquarters, has entered a crucial phase. British and Canadian forces are now holding a beachhead nearly 40 miles wide. Fierce fighting is taking place around Caen, which came under sustained Allied bombardment today. To the west, American troops are advancing towards the town of Isigny. We have two reports in a moment on the American advance, but first, the German counterattack against the British Second Army around Caen.
Extraordinary film in the circumstances and revealing. For although we see a German army in apparent good fettle and counter-attacking fiercely today to stem the Allied advance, the impression abides among seasoned military observers that the redoubtable Rommel is still unable to mount a major counter-offensive against the Allied invasion. The Germans continued today to hold off Allied units trying to capture Caen, but Rommel clearly has his problems. He has elements of 3 crack panzer divisions around the town. The 12th SS, seen here on film, heavily camouflaged against air attack, but not yet seemingly at full strength. The Panzer Lehr, rated the best tank division in the German army, and the 21st Panzer Division, an elite unit from Rommel's old Afrika Corps, at full strength, protecting Caen with tanks, infantry and mobile guns. 2 of these divisions, the 12th SS and the 21st, today made what looked like a concerted effort to break through to the sea. It produced the roughest tank clash of the invasion so far. Canadian and German tanks were eyeball to eyeball. Canadians lost tanks and prisoners. We see a paratroop lieutenant here and troops from the North Nova Scotia Highlanders. What we don't see is what today's fighting cost the Germans. Their wrecked tanks, their prisoners, their dead. They are still, despite appearances, strategically on the defensive, and today's counterattack failed.
Despite appalling losses on the eastern beachhead 2 days ago, the Americans are pushing on. The supply operation is running more smoothly as units press inland, knocking out the German artillery positions which caused such devastation during the initial assault. Advance units of 5 Corps are making the running, inflicting some heavy losses in their drive south. German forces have now been pushed back across the strategically vital River Our. The Americans' immediate goal, the town of Isigny, where fierce fighting is already underway on the outskirts. They now seem likely to take it in the early hours of the morning, but it's already clear the town has taken a massive pounding. Streets and houses were today badly damaged by concerted Allied bombardment. For the Americans, Isigny is a key objective. With it comes control of key roads and bridges. The US advance depends on taking it. During the day, German prisoners were seized in the approach to the town, their forces caught unawares by the speed and direction of the US advance. Nonetheless, all units were warned to prepare for enemy counterattacks after reinforcements were sighted some 70 miles south of the battlefront. The Americans are making good use of their new supplies. 6 artillery battalions are moving into position for the attack. It's hard to imagine such a radical improvement in US fortunes. Tonight, they aim to punch a corridor between their 2 bridgeheads and spearhead the Allied drive south. The advance is in second gear and looks hard to stop.
In the House of Commons, the Prime Minister, Mr Churchill, has given a strong warning against over-optimism. The Prime Minister surprised the House by not making a detailed statement about the fighting. He said he would not be doing so unless there were what he called exceptional circumstances. And then he urged MPs to go to their constituencies and maintain morale. Mr Churchill said people should not think that matters would be settled quickly. Although great dangers lie behind, enormous exertions lie before us, he said. The Supreme Allied Commander, General Eisenhower, has said that all troops are performing magnificently. Yesterday, he held a conference on board a British warship with General Montgomery and Admiral Ramsay, the Allied Naval Commander. Today, General Montgomery went ashore for the first time to take personal command of the Allied armies. He says he is very well satisfied with the general situation. The BBC's Michael Standing was on one of those beaches earlier today. Here now is his report on the operation to reinforce the Allied advance.
The build-up is going well. I spent some hours on the beaches this morning watching men, food, ammunition and supplies come streaming in. It's a combined operation between Navy, Army and Merchant Navy. The effort is enormous. The results, in some cases, staggering. Up and down those lanes, almost as though on conveyor belts, the regular steady stream of ducks was moving. Hundreds of them. They went out empty from the shore, changed from wheel drive to propeller a few yards out, and made tracks, or rather wakes, for the merchantmen lying 2 or 3 miles out to sea. Down the next door lane, they were coming inshore, reversing the process, and driving their piled cargoes of sugar crates, tires, petrol, shells, up the coast road to the depots.
And now some home news. And the new education bill proposed by Mr R.A. Butler, which will introduce far-reaching reforms in our schools, was given a second reading by the House of Lords today. But there were angry words after one Conservative peer suggested that public schools produce better soldiers than elementary schools.
If the Duke of Wellington believed the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton, that argument was pushed to its limit in the upper house by Lord Buckmaster. His suggestion that public schoolboys were more responsible and could bear punishment with greater fortitude than elementary school children drew a sharp response from Lord Latham. It was untrue, Lord Latham retorted, that those who had been to public school had more courage. Such statements were entirely indefensible and offensive to the bulk of those who are serving this country in the forces in the cause of freedom and liberty. The clash in the House of Lords points to the underlying debate over Mr Butler's education bill. At present, only 3 out of every 100 children enjoy the privilege of a private education, which continues after the age of 11. In the state sector, local education authorities are obliged to provide elementary education only, although some already provide more. The new bill aims to provide state secondary education for all those aged 11 or more. The school leaving age is to be raised to 15 and eventually to 16. Technical education is to be made available to produce a range of skills for contemporary society. And each school must start the day with religious assembly, the first time this has been made compulsory. The education bill has had a difficult progress in wartime. There's been opposition from Conservative forces within Mr Butler's own party to this perceived erosion of elitism. The new bill is being presented as a crucial part of the framework for post-war society. Today, the House of Lords gave it its second reading without a division. Winding up for the government, Lord Selborne, the Minister of Economic Warfare, said Mr Butler had started the country forward on the road of educational progress.
Today is the King's official birthday. His Majesty spent the day quietly at Buckingham Palace. This afternoon, he and the Queen went to Downing Street for tea with the Prime Minister and Mrs Churchill. Recently, the King and Queen met the crew of an American bomber, which is today in the news.
During a tour of American Army Air Force bases, the King and Queen met the men who fly the Memphis Belle, the first flying fortress to complete 25 missions over enemy territory. During her combat tour, the B-17 has been hit by every type of anti-aircraft fire. Having survived, she and her crew have a very different target in their sights. They're flying home as celebrities to raise money for the American war bond drive as a film about their mission opens at the Empire Cinema in London today. The colour documentary shows what it's like flying daylight raids over Germany. The teamwork of the 10-man crew comes over graphically. Last month alone, over 200 American and British bombers were reported missing. It will be an honourable retirement, and the bomber is assured of star treatment.
Nearly 1,000 people who've helped the war effort on the home front are in the second half of the King's birthday honours list. They include British Empire medals for foster mothers who've taken in evacuees and others such as parachute makers and censors and black market breakers. There's also an MBE for the holiday camp founder Mr. W.E. Billy Butlin for his work in advising the Ministry of Supply on hostels. Supreme Allied Headquarters has been revealing details of some of the success stories of D-Day. Allied tanks were waterproofed so that they could drive ashore through up to 6 feet of water. Troops have been going ashore with special folding bicycles, while news from Normandy has, quite literally, been winging its way back to Britain.
Some of the first armour ashore consisted of Major General Percy Hobart's funnies. For any troops who had served in the desert, the appearance of the flail tank, the Crab, was a welcome sight. It was used successfully at El Alamein. Flailing 3 feet into the ground, it's designed to clear mines for infantry and light vehicles to follow. It will prove invaluable on the hard drive to the strategically important town of Caen. Less spectacular is transport used during the Great War, the bicycle. In a major effort towards mobility, folding bikes and mini power cycles have been developed. First reports suggest that in spite of trials, riding bikes with full battle kit is at best a precarious way of getting about. It is thought that bikes will be more useful by the time second and third echelon troops, especially medics, get ashore in secure areas. Communications have been aided by carrier pigeons, kept in a special canister while being parachuted in with the airborne troops. The birds carry messages and position reports back to their bases in England. There are also reports that some dead pigeons carrying false messages have been dropped near German lines to confuse the enemy. But the truly leading light of the initial assault seems to have been 2 midget submarines, the so-called X-craft, first launched in March of last year. Naval staff suggest that 4 days before D-Day, 2 of the 50-feet-long boats, X-20 and X-23, left Portsmouth, commanded by 2 Australian volunteer reserve officers. They then lay off the French coast for 76 hours, 64 of them on the sea bottom, awaiting the invasion. When the assault began, they surfaced and flashed their green lights to guide in British and Canadian landing forces.
Finally, some news from other war fronts. The Germans say Russian forces in northwest Romania have opened a new front north of the Nazi-held base of Jassy. In Italy, the 5th Army has captured Civita Castellana, 30 miles north of Rome, while the 8th Army, moving up the Tiber Valley, has taken Subiaco. And in northwest India, Japanese forces are withdrawing south from Kohima, pursued by the British. And that was the news tonight, the 8th of June 1944, as British and Canadian forces try to move out from the beachheads in Normandy in the face of a gathering German counterattack. From the BBC, good night.